everyone, welcome back to the Hardware News Recap for the week. We are fully back and operational. We have a ton of content coming up. We talk about that really briefly. This episode, though, is packed with news. So first of all, DirectStorage finally becoming a thing that's getting utilized. NVIDIA following up fast behind with an RTX IO update in a Portal mod. And additionally, on the physical hardware and firmware side, AMD has a new AGESA update that boosts RAM performance in a massive way. And that's something that AMD's Bill Alverson, he was recently in our AMD Lab Tour documentary, he talked about that in a Reddit post and gave some more details on it. And there's a lot more to talk about, so let's get started. Before that, this video is brought to you by the Lexar NM800 Pro Gen 4 SSD. The NM800 is a heavy-duty SSD with an included heatsink, thermal pad contact to the heatsink, and high transfer speeds across a Gen 4x4 NVMe interface. The Lexar NM800 Pro is available in 512GB, 1TB, and 2TB capacities, and Lexar notes that its included heat spreader, plus its choice of NAND, allows it to run at 7,500 megabytes per second sequential read and 6,500 megabytes per second sequential write at fastest. Learn more at the link in the description below. The GN update I'll keep super short this time. We took about the last month or so after Computex to just work internally. First of all, slow down a little bit because of the Computex is very tiring to do. But secondly, overhaul our testing. We talked about that last episode with ITX case reviews coming up. We're really excited about that. We have an overhaul to ATX case testing that I just spent the last couple weeks working on tuning and building the software for. And that will move us from our ATX methodology that was first developed in 2016 and then overhauled moderately in 2019 or so, maybe 2020, to a completely new methodology, new components, new tests, and Patrick and I are really excited to get going with that. It's all done now, and we already have the first set of data in our validation passes for the new methodology and the new hardware. We're gonna collect 2 more cases for that. We'll have numbers to kind of know the scaling, and then we just move forward with a brand new set of case charts. And we'll be talking about that in a separate methodology video, but just so you know, there's over 300 rows of data for our case reviews per sheet for some of the sheets that date back to 2016 for our old case methodology, what is now becoming our old methodology. So that's a lot of data. We will be moving away from it because that's the nature of moving to a new bench. But I don't know, when we do the sort of send off for it, I'll figure out some way to repackage a bunch of it. So if there's numbers you all might not have ever seen, for example, because we just, didn't publish them, we didn't think they were interesting at the time, we'll figure out a way to distribute those just as a send off for it. So that's what we've been working on, and we have some other really interesting sort of science-y testing projects that are in editing. So they're done, they're filmed, and those are coming up too. So in other words, we're back from our 4 weeks of kind of refining things, and we posted a YouTube community post about it, but I wanted to share it here as well. Okay, first story is new AMD AGESA. AGESA, if you don't know, is the binary that goes, it's sort of the foundation of BIOS or firmware for AMD CPUs. So AMD distributes this package, AGESA, and that goes to motherboard vendors who then integrate it. So the AMD overclocking menu, not to be confused with, say, like ASUS Tweakers Paradise or whatever. The name sounds a lot worse when you say it out loud. Not to be confused with the motherboard first-party menus, AMD's own menus. That is provided by AMD, and it's the foundation for a lot of the performance that you get out of an AMD CPU. So AMD has an update for that. They are moving to version 1007B. This is also the binary package, or the package in general that got updated after the Ryzen 7000 X3D melting stuff, where they capped some of the VSOC. This, though, is not a longevity improvement, it's a feature improvement. The microcode update is being pushed by AMD now to motherboard manufacturers. They're starting to put it in BIOSes. If you want to get a beta version, several of the board vendors have one out there, so if you have a new AMD motherboard, you could install that. Bill Alverson from AMD posted on Reddit about this in response to a thread and gave some detail. And if you don't know, that's the same Bill who was in our Lab Tour documentary series. And as we mentioned there, he was behind a lot of the development of Expo and determining stable memory configurations, clocks and timings. And so he is definitely the guy to talk to this matter. So the post, the user showed a screenshot running Memtest Pro with DDR5 7200 under the new BIOS. Prior to this, it was very difficult to get Ryzen 7000 to run RAM faster than 6200 megatransfers per second. Bill jumped in and he said, quote, "This result is a product of AGESA 1007B, which we've been working hard to get released. I've been running 7200 CL32 with timing similar or extrapolated to the BuildZoid 6000 recipe at home and in the lab. But that's not all. Many CPUs can run 6400 1-to-1 now, but not all of them. Also, you can enable memory context restore and expect a better result for most kits and boards." The part he mentioned about 1-to-1 is really important here. So in past Ryzen generations, older ones, you wanted a 1-to-1-to-1. There's an additional 2-1 there. And that was U-clock, M-clock, and Infinity Fabric. For this context for the post here, all we're talking about is U-clock and M-clock. And so the reason 1-to-1 is important is because the actual DRAM frequency, so for example, 3000 megahertz for a 6000 megatransfer per second kit for DDR5, that is usually synchronized with the clock speed of Zen 4's memory controller, and that would be U-clock. And additionally, the new AGESA allows for cleaner desynchronization of the clocks via some new features. So it allows the memory frequency, or M-clock, to run closer to the limit of the memory chips themselves. Bill says, quote, "This new AGESA includes a bunch of new settings to allow manual control of the same stuff we added. Most notable is DDR5 Nitro mode, which allows altering some internal memory controller timing parameters. This is the main knob that enables the higher speeds. We also now exposed settings to let you change behavior of memory training itself, including the ability to run a much more comprehensive training algorithm to enhance margin and stability at the expense of extra time on the first boot on many kits and boards." Many of you who've had Ryzen Zen 4 systems already know the frustration of sort of that first boot memory training time. So this is going to be longer. You really have to want this extra training, the memory training. When you boot the system, especially for the first time, memory will train. It will find especially all the sub-timings that are not manually set or set by the kit itself. It will find stable timings, try to apply them, try to boot. It'll cycle until it can lock all of those in. There's some other stuff that goes on in there too, but that's the basics. So the extra time could be as much as 5 minutes for 32 gigabyte kits. So that would be staring at a black screen for 5 minutes while it's trying to boot. You have to be patient. It helps if you have a 7-segment display on the board so you can at least confirm that it's doing anything, because sometimes it looks like it might just be stuck in an off state, but it is trying to train. It depends on what you're presented by the board. So since the new BIOSes have come out, overclockers have begun posting screenshots up to DDR5 8000 running tests in Windows, BuildZoid among them. We don't know what the ceiling for commonly stable speeds will be yet, but this is where the role of the enthusiast comes in. Quote, "This is basically the only thing I've been working on for 8 to 10 weeks, and I'm excited to see it released. A lot of awesome engineers helped to get this done. I can't wait to see more in-depth coverage as folks start playing with this and figuring stuff out. Take care." And this is where companies enabling that scrappy skunkworks mentality for setting time aside for projects like this comes to benefit the company. If it works out, you get things like additional tuning and levers for the product. So we probably won't do RAM benchmarks with this. We might. I'm not sure what our plans are right now. We have so much stuff lined up with just all the cases in the works, plus coolers. I don't know that we'll have time to go and do RAM tuning with this AGESA, but depends on sort of what reception, what response we see. Either way, if you have a Zen 4 platform, maybe go check it out. And if you have a higher performing kit that is tuned down because it wasn't stable before, maybe it's stable now. Up next, DirectStorage 1.2 is finally coming to a full PC game with the release of Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart on July 26th. The announcement came in an update posted to the game's Steam page by the developer. The post includes information about the technologies used in the game as well as the system requirements for various levels of quality. DirectStorage is a relatively new feature of DirectX 12 that allows for the GPU to access game files directly from your storage device. The advantage is being able to load multiple gigabytes worth of small files per second. Version 1.2 of DirectStorage also adds the ability for the GPU to handle the decompression of those assets. all of this storage-related work is traditionally done on the CPU and scales non-linearly as bandwidth increases. So direct storage should be an even more important feature as we move towards the future. Microsoft has a demo and benchmark of DirectStorage 1.2 available on its GitHub page to let developers quickly see the feature's potential. And the demo comes uncompiled, so you'll have to compile it yourself or find someone else who has. But either way, several users online were showing times under 1 second to load over 8 gigabytes into VRAM, which is great. Going back to the Steam post, the developers posted recommended PC specs for the game. To run at 1080p 60, it suggested an RTX 2060 or RX 5700 for the GPU, an i5 8400 or R5 3600 for the CPU, 16 gigabytes of RAM, and 75 gigabytes of specifically SSD storage. This marks another developer now specifically requiring or at least recommending SSD space rather than leaving it more vague to allow for hard drive storage. So the world is moving away from hard drives, at least for these high capacity or high density types of applications like games now, where they're all huge and need the speed. Anyway, direct storage should be beneficial for dealing with that problem and for loading things in like textures without as many of the either long load times or obvious sort of pop-in and LOD, level detail scaling issues that you might see. RTX IO is next. So this is related. NVIDIA's RTX IO technology is now finally available. And for this first launch, they've got it in Portal Preload RTX. It's a remake of the popular mod for the original Portal game. So that's right, mods have gotten so good and finally to the level of acclaim that they've deserved for a long time, especially from companies, that we are remastering mods. So as a community, we're making mods of games and then we're remastering those mods rather than the base game, which we're fine with. That, as someone who spent way more time modding or installing mods for Skyrim than playing it, that's fine for me. This was done with the NVIDIA RTX Remix suite of tools. So the developers of the mod used NVIDIA's suite, and that suite features RTX IO for asset loading. The devs were able to AI upscale many of the textures, replace models, and redo all the lighting with full path tracing. They also implemented RTX IO, which is actually extremely close as a cousin to the tech in the last story. While Ratchet & Clank is the first DX12 DirectStorage 1.2 game, the foundation for asset compression and decompression, or G-deflate here, actually came as a contribution to the project from NVIDIA. So RTX IO works in exactly the same way, or at least the outcome is exactly the same, which is dramatically lowering load times and reducing texture pop-in. NVIDIA also claims RTX IO will lower the amount of disk space used by games, which we assume is the result of better compression algorithms and better or higher compression ratios. It's interesting that NVIDIA chose to get this out to the world first through a mod and not through a full game release through some partnered studio. It might speak to them wanting to get some additional attention as a side effect to the Remix suite of tools, which is actually pretty cool. We haven't used it, but looking at some of the demos and user footage online, it looks like it's, for modding, it could be a very useful utility. So NVIDIA's got it out there through this Portal update via the modders. And it could also just be that they needed literally anything to launch following the direct storage announcements. But either way, I'll probably be trying to add Portal to, well, not the old one, to our benchmarking suite for GPUs for the path tracing or the ray tracing support to see how things do with it. All right, GDDR7 is up next, and Samsung's math confuses us. So Samsung announced that it has completed development on GDDR7 VRAM, or the memory that goes specifically on video cards to accompany GPUs, and it claims that this memory is 1.4x faster. But that number didn't really make a lot of sense to us because they also make claims later of GDDR7 reaching speeds up to 32 gigabits per pin, which is actually only 33% more than GDDR6's 24 gigabits per second. And even the extrapolated total, 1.5 terabytes per second, Samsung says is 1.4 times faster than GDDR6's 1.1 terabytes per second, is off too. That's actually only 36% faster, not 40% faster, which is what 1.4 means. So it's some generous and convenient rounding, but close enough. Let's move to the story. The speed increases are the result of Samsung switching to PAM3. PAM stands for Pulse Amplitude Modulation. The 3 stands for 3. and it's signaling over the previous NRZ, or non-return to zero. Samsung says PAM3 allows 50% more data to be transmitted within the same cycle, although we don't know if that number's been stretched as well. Another typical benefit for memory advancements is power consumption. Here, Samsung says it's up 20% in efficiency, so it's improved there. But despite the efficiency gain, it's possible that power is up. Samsung didn't note that because higher efficiency, but also higher performance. Efficiency is only a calculation of performance against power consumption. It doesn't tell us the actual base value of power consumption unless we have the third and final variable to extrapolate it. So Samsung is moving to a more thermally conductive epoxy compared to its previous molding compound that it used on the ICE. It says that this will result in a, quote, 70% reduction in thermal resistance compared to GDDR6. The move to a better thermal epoxy and the increase in efficiency tells us maybe the power's up. GDDR in general is fairly low heat flux, at least for the current versions. But Samsung said GDDR7 will be verified in tests with its key customers this year, so it'll work its way into new graphics cards after that. One thing they didn't go up on is capacity. We're still waiting on Samsung's GDDR6W for that. We mentioned it in a previous hardware news episode, but the short version is that it's a double stacked variant of GDDR6 with double the capacity and therefore more bandwidth as well. Up next, updates on Microsoft and its attempted acquisition of Activision Blizzard King, which is one of the largest game publishers in the world. And the US Federal Trade Commission had previously filed for a preliminary injunction blocking the acquisition so it could go through court proceedings to basically force Microsoft and Activision to convince them why the deal should be permitted. So a lot has happened since then, including the FTC losing against Microsoft twice and the overall deadline for the deal being extended to October 18th. The original court case regarding the FTC's block went in favor of Microsoft, with the judge's ruling reading as follows, quote, Microsoft's acquisition of Activision has been described as the largest in tech history. It deserves scrutiny. That scrutiny has paid off. Microsoft has committed in writing, in public, and in court to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation for 10 years on parity with Xbox. It made an agreement with Nintendo to bring Call of Duty to Switch. First of all, Call of Duty, not the most Nintendo-friendly franchise. Maybe they're branching out. Secondly, Call of Duty running on the Switch when there are phones more capable at this point. Maybe they'll make a special version. But okay, as long as the court feels like it's done something of value, then great for them, I guess. It also entered several agreements for the first time to bring Activision's content to several cloud gaming services, the statement read. The quote continued, they said, quote, the court's responsibility in this case is narrow. It is to decide if, notwithstanding these current circumstances, the merger should be halted, perhaps even terminated, pending resolution of the FTC administrative action. For the reasons explained, the court finds the FTC has not shown a likelihood it will prevail on its claim this particular vertical merger in this specific industry may substantially lessen competition. To the contrary, the record evidence points to more consumer access to Call of Duty and other Activision content. The motion for a preliminary injunction is therefore denied. Now, a couple things here. First of all, committing to 10 years of non-exclusivity is like nothing. These companies don't operate on a human scale of 10 years. We're not talking about owner-operator who has a finite lifespan. We're talking about these companies are trying to exist until the end of the earth. So 10 years of non-exclusivity, whatever. It's like change at this point because you're talking console generational cycles can be 10 years. So that really doesn't mean anything to us as people who actually have played video games. But it's an extremely clear ruling at this point. The undaunted FTC has filed an appeal, and that appeal was against Judge Corley's decision, and they filed it with the Federal Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. This second attempt was quickly denied, which makes clear the ruling, at least in the US. But there's one other place where the Activision-Microsoft merger, acquisition, the acquisition, has faced trouble, and it's in the UK. Now, while we don't know British law here at Gamers Nexus, as if we know American law, we do know British people. So you can trust us as an authority Because we know Leo from Kit Guru.
So everyone now knows everything, and they've taken whatever action they deemed appropriate, and that action would appear to be nothing.
In my dealings with Leo, I've learned that perhaps there's truth to the concept that there's additional cynicism over the pond, or at least sarcasm, and it's a healthy dose. I think I could get used to it. Maybe that's why Microsoft has faced more challenges in the UK. Let's look at that. Now, the second attempt getting denied would have allowed Microsoft to close the deal with Activision Blizzard by the original July 18th deadline. But the UK's Competition and Markets Authority is still blocking the acquisition for the time being. The situation was turned over to the UK's Competition Appeal Tribunal as CAT, and you are to take them very seriously. This allows Microsoft to file a new proposal to the CMA in order to negotiate a remedy. Otherwise, the cat will get them. One possibility is the divestiture of Microsoft's cloud gaming business in the UK. Now, if you're not familiar with British law, it's okay, because we're actually an expert on it. It'll go from CAT to the London Investment Tribunal to extend revenue, also known as LITR. And then after it made it through both CAT and LITR, the CMA extended the deadline 6 weeks to August 29th. Activision Blizzard COO tweeted this about the status of the merger and confirming the acquisition deadline, saying, quote, given global regulatory approvals and the company's confidence that CMA now recognizes there are remedies available to meet their concerns in the UK, the Activision Blizzard and Microsoft boards of directors have authorized the companies not to terminate the deal until after October 18th. We're confident in our next steps and that our deal will quickly close. In the middle of all this, NASDAQ removed Activision Blizzard from the NASDAQ 100 and replaced it with another company, which could be in preparation for Activision Blizzard's consumption by Microsoft. Just going around eating companies, just like Google. Blizzard maybe will become delisted from the market if the deal is successful. But at this point, it's looking fairly likely that Microsoft will eventually be allowed to buy Activision, furthering the great conglomeration of all media and entertainment. Up next, Intel's not done pivoting yet. We reported in our last episode how Intel was killing its NUC business, and it is. However, there's a quick follow-up to this story, and it's ASUS jumping in. So ASUS has reached an agreement with Intel to manufacture, sell, and support the 10th through 13th generation NUC designs, as well as develop future generations. The ASUS COO had this to say, quote, thank you, Intel, for your confidence in us to take the NUC systems product line forward. I'm confident that this collaboration will enhance and accelerate our vision for the mini PC, greatly expanding our footprint in areas such as AI and AIoT. We are committed to ensuring the excellent support and service that NUC systems customers expect. Now, we're not sure how they're going to expand AI and AI of things, OT, with mini PCs. It seems like not the thing that they're gonna expand. That's more of like a big computer type of thing. But anyway, if they made this statement a couple years ago, then they'd probably be talking about the meta computers and meta internet or something. So buzzwords, as always, ever healthy in the C-suite over at any company, but especially ASUS. The most critical part of this is obviously the multiple hours-long meetings that ASUS will be holding to determine whether the products get the ASUS ROG logo, the Intel skull logo, or maybe they'll throw a Strix owl in there just for some extra flair. Maybe they could combine the Intel skull with two ASUS ROG eyes and put a Strix owl in the background. There's a lot of options here, and we expect that ASUS will fully commit the millions of dollars required to make the right decision. That's it for news this week. Thanks for watching. As always, we have a lot of cool stuff coming up. We just published our Deep Cool Assassin 4 review, so if you've been missing our cooler reviews, they're back, and that one's pretty interesting. And we also have a pre-built review either coming up or online already about the Alienware R15. So check for that. Otherwise, subscribe for more. As always, go to store.gamersnexus.net to help us out directly by buying something like one of our solder mats that you see on the table here in front of me, one of our mod mats, one of our shirts, or other items. And you can go to patreon.com/gamersnexus to help us out there. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you all next time.